Welcome to this new episode of the Power series, Extinction is Forever. For those who've not joined this series before, the Power series is bringing together experts and industry leaders across the globe to discuss key themes through the lens of holistic sustainability. Today, Positive Luxury CEO Diana Verde Nieto will be joined by Kristin Rechberger, CEO of Dynamic Planet, and Helen Crowley, Fellow and Senior Advisor for Resilient Supply Chains at Conservation International. They will be discussing what businesses can do now to fight biodiversity loss. Before we start, I just want to let you know that we will have 10 minutes at the end to answer a few questions, so please submit them in the Q&A box. Over to you, Diana.
Thank you so much, Claudia. And you rightly pointed out that when we started the first series, we just had lockdown. And actually in the UK today is our first day of lockdown. So great. Well, I'd like to start with a big thank you to Helen and to Kristin for taking the next half hour to share with us your experience and your wealth of knowledge and the incredible amount of work and meaning in the work that you have done throughout the years. So I'd like to start with our reflection, which is yesterday was a really sad day for our planet as US have withdrawn from the Paris Agreement. And I guess that this takes us to something slightly deeper, which is, what is the state of our world? What is the state of our biodiversity, both into the land and our oceans? I'd like to start with you, Kristin, if I may. And it's like, what is this sixth extinction and what does this mean for our oceans?
Thank you so much, Diana. And thank you for having me today, especially with Helen. The Paris Agreement, just to note, is something that if Biden gets elected, he said immediately he'll try to get back in and recommit the United States to that. And I'll also mention that what's been inspiring is that there's a lot happening in the US for climate outside of the Paris Agreement on the federal level, especially at the city level. So don't lose hope on that right now. And we'll keep working regardless of the president figurehead in the US on climate in the next decade for sure, because we all know the dire consequences of going over 1.5 degrees C for the planet, which includes the extinction piece. So, the extinction piece includes not just the climate pressures, but also the habitat loss. And as you all may know, I remember sitting at my desk a few years ago and reading the WWF report where it said that we've lost 60% of terrestrial life since 1970. And I thought, oh my God, that was in my lifetime. I can say in my lifetime. And you all probably know too, you've seen the devastation of the waste and plastics in the ocean, but we've also lost 90% of our large predators in the ocean through eating large fish or the whaling era and other ways that humans have basically taken out everything we want from the ocean and dumped in everything we don't want, which makes for obviously a very bad relationship. And then I guess the biggest headline that I think is amazing is that 96% of mammals on the planet now are humans. Only 4%, humans and livestock, only 4% are wild. And so when you think about all of the mammals, that's any of these four-legged creatures that, give milk at birth, that's what a mammal is, from the zebras and camels and cows and all those types of animals and humans. 96% are human and livestock, which is, we've really domesticated our planet. And that's why scientists call this era the Anthropocene. And it means that we're eroding the life that we depend on. And we're basically, one of my friends, Andrew Mitchell, who does a lot of nature finance work, last year was at a finance meeting, and he said, banks don't realize that we're investing in our own extinction. The way that our capital markets are set up, the way that companies are using our resources, and we're not investing back in. So my partner and I do a lot of work in ocean regeneration by building marine protected areas, and I can tell you a little bit more about that. But the good news is we know what to do, and when we know what to do, nature rebounds really quickly on land and in the ocean. And I can tell you some of the things that we do that. But that's a quick summary of where we are with this crisis, and it's really, really scary.
Thank you, Kristin. And Helen, the same question goes to you regarding our land and our earth.
Yeah, well, Kristin covered a lot of the good stuff and the really key points, and I also echo this sort of guilt that I feel of having seen this happen in my lifetime, and I've been a conservation biologist my entire life, so I feel like it's sort of a deep sense of failure. But that notwithstanding, one of the great things that we have is hope, and we should never ever give that up. And we do have, as Kristin said, this incredible knowledge that we have more knowledge now about what's happening and what we need to do to stop it and solve the problems than we've ever had before. And so I think at a really exciting cusp of this next decade where we can do an incredible amount. I think just to build on what Kristin said about, like, you know, the extinction and the loss and degradation of ecosystems, the extinction of species, and extinction of species is forever, but we can restore habitat. We can restore and regenerate soils. There's a lot of power in nature. I think people who haven't been close to nature don't really get that. I mean, I've been studying it my whole life, and I don't mean this in a patronizing way. It's simply that it's hard to imagine that it can actually regenerate and restore in the way it can. It's a powerful thing. It's been around for 2 billion years, and we've been around for about, I don't know, 70,000. So, you know, they've got this there's this incredible network and connectivity and power of regeneration and restoration. If we allow it, we've degraded and destroyed so much that it's hard to imagine that happening. But it is possible. And that's the exciting bit about road ahead. It isn't just, it's about stopping the bad, stopping the biodiversity loss, stopping the degradation, but it's also about the positive, turning that curve of biodiversity upwards, because we're going to restore and protect ecosystems and restore and protect species and so on. And I think the last year, if I look back on the last 18 months to 2 years, it's been really, and I do this to keep my hope alive, and then I'm pretty good at pretty optimistic, but I every so often need to remind myself the progress we've made. 2 years ago, we were having a lot of conversations about how to get nature on the agenda, like climate, right? And how to really get and nature not just as a solution to climate, which it really is a solution to climate. You know, 30-odd% of the climate solution is natural climate solutions, but also nature, for people to understand the importance, the intrinsic value, as well as the value to society. And I think we've got there in a very rapid space of time. And in terms of business, there's an awareness now, the WEF report putting biodiversity loss at one of the top 5 risks to business. The follow-up reports in the summer that showed that half of the global GDP is moderately or highly dependent on nature. And that sort of started, we go, oh, right, nature, okay, it can help solve climate. And wow, I should be really looking at nature. You know, Andrew's work with the sort of nature risk disclosure project as well, business and investors saying, oh, you know, we've got to start looking at this. And the exciting bit is we've got the knowledge to know what to do, but we also now have a willingness and an interest to start looking at that across the board of, I think, of leadership business. So it's a very important moment that we're in at the moment now in this year.
Thank you so much. And actually, I think nature, now that we stopped for at least the last 8 months, has said, yes, thank you so much. I'm breathing and regenerating. And, you know, I think we have seen quite a lot of this restoration kind of coming to life. And then it's really kind of crystallizing the point that you just make so eloquently, Helen. And actually, I want to keep with you for a second. It's like, okay, you have you have taken a sabbatical working for Conservation International, but also you have actually worked at some of the biggest luxury groups in the world. So my question to you is, what role can business play in addressing the biodiversity challenges?
Right. So, sure. Just to refer back to what you just said then, though, Diana. I mean, I think we've all during this terrible time of the pandemic, we've experienced nature in different ways. We've seen, you know, obviously these fantastic images of wildlife in towns and in places it never was before. But I would just highlight also that, in fact, it's also being lost at an ever increasing rate, because people rely on nature for their livelihoods. And when they can't make a livelihood in the city, or the markets collapse, or the supply chains collapse, they'll go back and they'll try and make a life. And I'm not blaming them. We'd all do the same. We have to feed our children, feed ourselves. So they'll go back to the forest or wherever and try and make a livelihood there. So in fact, there has been there's a lot of evidence of increased poaching, of increased loss of forest and so on, because of the economic turmoil we're in. Yet another indication of that interdependentness that we have on nature, and that we've really got to work really hard to protect and restore it. And that's where the business and their supply chains is really, really important, that we've got to build across our supply chains and our business. First of all, an understanding of impact and dependencies on nature, because basically, let's look at luxury. It's an agricultural forestry-based company, whether you mining as well. If you really, you trace it back, it's agriculture, mining, and forestry. That's where we get our raw materials from. And so agriculture is one of the biggest drivers of loss on land. And it has a big impact in oceans with all the chemicals and the runoff and creating dead zones and so on, not even going into microplastics and pollutants and so on. But the agriculture is a big driver. Forests is so important to us, so we've got to look at that. So the thing that companies can do now, and they're starting to do, and particularly in our sector, is to really understand their supply chains, their impacts and dependencies, and start focusing in on where they can make a difference. And what does that mean? That means supporting more regenerative agricultural practices. That means from smallholder producers and their livelihoods through to larger scale producers, and helping support. It's not just rewarding, there's an organic fair trade cotton farmer in India. Definitely we need to sort of support that. It's supporting a transition. It's about saying, you are custodians of, stewards of nature, custodians of the soil, whatever. We all need that. We as companies also need those materials you're growing. We're going to help you through this. And we know that's important, and we're going to prioritize our materials and that come from these systems and support the farmers to transition. There is so much we can do. And the upside of that is not, especially in our sector, we're the best storytellers sort of out there. We sell a lot of things that we don't really need, So let's sell those things based on a really good story. Let's make those products so meaningful and profoundly valuable. And I don't mean that in an economic sense, profoundly valuable, because in that shirt, there's livelihoods, there's biodiversity, there's restoration. And so you start really taking clothes and things take on a whole new meaning. So we have a role in our supply chains to show leadership in supporting restoration, regeneration across natural production systems, but also natural ecosystems. We have a role to tell a story. When I say a story, I mean a fact-based story, not just made up, and to help people understand the links between nature and what they wear. And we have a role more broadly to collaborate beyond our supply chains, to be transformative, to sort of transform the way we talk about nature, the way we work with others, to build new coalitions, whether it's the food sector or the mining sector or whatever, to build together a real sort of force, a private sector force that really shows we can do this and we can make a difference, and we will support the transition to nature positive. And that will help also give confidence to governments to say, oh, okay, these policies are going to work, because look, all these companies are lined up to do that. And I think our sector is positioned to be a real leader in that area.
Thank you so much, Kristin. And, I think, Kristin, thank you much, Helen. I was thinking of you, Kristin. The work that you do in dynamic planning is absolutely phenomenal. You have, with your partner, Enrique Salas, restore a lot of our oceans. And I love you to go a little bit into the work that you do. But I also would like to ask you, what would the world look like in 2025? What's that vision? What should we strive towards? Because so much of your work is future. So over to you.
Great. So in 2025, the world hopefully will have committed to all the climate targets that they're supposed to, and also protecting 30% of nature by 2030 and being well on our way to expanding that nature. So currently, just to give you some baselines, 15% of the land is protected and about 7% of the ocean, but only 2% of the ocean in no mining, drilling, or fishing, no take reserves, which you know regenerate very quickly within about 5 years, which is a great return on investment. And basically, we know science is telling us that we need half the earth in natural state to keep providing for us. That means the fresh water we drink, the clean air we breathe, the food that Helen mentioned that can be grown regeneratively. And people sometimes think, if we're going to have 10 billion people on the planet, how are we going to feed them, and where are they going to live? And don't we need all that space for people? And the truth is, we actually, with more people, we need to expand nature, because we need all those services to support all those people. And so scientists are telling us we need half of Earth protected by 2050 in natural state and community conservancies and indigenous managed lands, so that it can keep providing for us. And so by 2025, I mean, we can be well on our way to do that. So that's the 30% of the planet. The other 70% is what Helen's talking about, which is sustainably managed areas, regenerative agriculture, sustainable forestry, sustainable fisheries, regenerative tourism. Tourism is actually considered kind of a softer industry compared to, say, fashion, which we know there's fashion products and it's the luxury business, and there tends to be traditionally a lot of waste, which I know a lot of groups like you are changing. But, you know, tourism is kind of a short-term extraction industry too. It's there isn't almost any travelers that can give directly back to the nature they're seeing. Why don't we close those loops? When people fall in love with a place, why can't you donate back and make sure that there's systems so that you know that you can be an ambassador for that place for the rest of your life? So we're trying to close up some of these systems, because we know that we need to not only move to clean energy for climate and rely on wind and sun. We know we need to produce food in much smarter ways, including for the ocean and from the land, and we need more nature. So like you said, in 2025, we have the plans to push, you mentioned the Paris Agreement at the beginning of the call. There's something called the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is being hosted in May next year in China. The world will be deciding how much space to give nature. That is where the 30 by 30 plan is going to be an important message. And there's a lot of groups that are already implementing protected areas and nature expansion to do that. And then there's the tools that Helen's mentioned, including the science-based targets for nature, and other groups that are working on the auditing process of what's going on in your supply chain, so that you can really be sure on that 70% of the rest of the planet that it's managed really well.
Can I pick up a bit on that? Because
I was going to ask you that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, because it's really great framing. You know, so let's look at that. So there's the 30%, which is protect, right? And that protect, as Kristin said, in many different ways. It doesn't mean it's, you know, it's local people, it's indigenous peoples who already are custodians of the vast amount of biodiversity on, particularly on land. I'm not sure of this, the marine equivalent. I think it's 80% of biodiversity in indigenous lands. But anyway, the point is that protect is about doing it in a socially just way as well. It's not about just sort of locking it up. So you've got your 30%, and then you've got a 20% that has to be sort of restored and into some functionality. So you get that half, that half of the earth. The thing that's really important when you're thinking about it is not to think there's that half over here and there's that half that we people live in. And I think that's been out, well, many philosophers much smarter than I have been talking about this for centuries, this disconnection that we as humans have from have had from nature in the last few centuries. We used to be much more connected, and we used to we knew that we were part of this system, and we need to think of that again, that it's not over there's nature and then there's us, that everything is interrelated and we depend on it, and it's part, the air that comes out of our mouths, the fresh air that comes in is coming from nature. You know, we are so connected. And I think, and I don't want to go off on a tangent on it, but I think it's an important sort of mind shift, because when we talk about the half earth, the 30%, the 50%, and then when we talk about the production lands and the lands where we're growing things and we're doing sustainable forestry, they're all sort of interconnected. So a production landscape, a farm, it's not just a frontier perhaps with a wilder area, a protected area. It in itself could have river systems, it could have little rocky outcrops that have rare species of orchids and lizards. It could have, have a belt of trees that are really important for birds. So there's a way of building mosaic on those production landscapes as well. And that's what we've got to look toward nature. When you start putting nature, think, oh, it's not just over there, it's in everything we do. It starts shifting the way you do things. So, the natural climate solutions, when you talk about the 30% of the solutions, as Kristin said, you've got the 70, technological solutions will help us for renewables and a lot of our climate strategies. We've got a lot of the nature solutions that help towards climate. And they have 3 buckets. They have protect, restore back to natural systems, and manage working lands and forests better. And I think that's sort of nice also way of thinking about it, keeping the interconnectedness in mind. But there's things we need to do to protect, there's things we need to do to restore, and there's things that we need to do to manage our working lands better. And they can all be done in the same landscape as well, so it doesn't have to be. So and with that comes story as well. With that becomes, as I talked to about before, with that becomes livelihoods. With that comes new food that has a better nutritional quality because the soil is better. And we're growing a variety of crops, and that goes on and on and on. So there's a lot that we can do on the land to restore and protect in this construct of sort of trying to get half of the world's ecological functionality back.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you so much for that. And unfortunately, I don't know how we actually been talking for almost half an hour.
Yeah.
We can definitely talk for England, actually something like Europe probably. So we have to go to Q&A. So first and foremost, I just want to thank you for the time and for the brain power for this. And I want to jump onto the Q&A section. And this is actually a question for you, Kristin. It's Evita from Mauritius. She says that there's less than 2% of endemic fauna and flora left. And the concrete question that she's asking is, how can we, in real concrete way, integrate biodiversity conservation into our supply chain as a tourism hospitality operator besides ecotourism or ecotours? Over to you, Kristin.
In Mauritius specifically, or in general? Basically, on the ocean side, marine protected areas, when they're set up in strategic places where there's already some life, they can rebound very, very quickly. And so we've seen that. We've gone to over 30 places with National Geographic's Pristine Seas. My partner is the lead on that project. And so as they go to set up large national parks in the sea, our company works on the conservation markets around that. So building tourism opportunities inside that, and then sustainable fisheries outside. And then there might be other things too, such as aquaculture or whatever is native to that place that the communities want to do. So, it's amazing how much, when you let nature just do its thing and rebound and you leave it alone, it really does come back. It's the same on the land, although the land's a little more difficult. There's property issues. We are land creatures, so we're more prevalent on the land. But the land is the same, and you've probably heard some of these rewilding stories where you can take one of the most industrial farms that's been there for a long time and the soil's totally gone. And then when some of these groups start to rebuild, starting with the soil, within a few years, they can't believe that the butterflies and bugs are back, and then the birds come back, and then it becomes this whole new ecosystem. And you're like, it's the way it was supposed to be before we destroyed it, basically. So I think, my suggestion would be pair science with local knowledge, depending on where you live, and work with the best NGOs and academics you can find to make sure the science is really solid. And rewild. I mean, really, it's the way the world needs to go, no matter how degraded your landscape or seascape is. We've been working in really pristine, remote parts of the ocean because they're the last Serengetis and Yellowstones of the sea, and we're working our way towards the coast. But if you're starting on the coast, you can have the same results. One tiny 1 kilometer marine reserve in the Metis Islands. Spain is a major fishing country. Off of Barcelona, 1 kilometer marine reserve supports 50 million euros in dive tourism a year. 1 kilometer marine reserve. Because that's where the fish go, because they are safe in this 1 kilometer area. So even if it's a small place, it will regenerate. And we need everybody to do that. If everybody does that, we will rewild the world.
I mean, I love your passion. I feel so empowered. So I'd like one last question from you both. What can we as consumers do? And what can we as businesses do? So maybe Helen, do you want to start that one? We only have 4 minutes.
You know, nothing. Oh yeah, it's always that one. Okay, so nothing replaces informing yourself, right? Now, you know, you've got to understand where stuff comes from and what it's made from and what impact it has. I think we certainly need to buy less. We need to buy better. I don't mean better in terms of more expensive and luxury. I mean in terms of understanding that thing that we have bought, whether it's vintage or whether it's new or whatever, what sort of impact that has. So I think that, and it's food as well, you know, and we're learning that. So I think this idea as consumer, informing yourself, understanding the difference between an ideological approach and a science-based approach also, that sometimes you might not want to do something from an ideology, or someone might say, oh, that's not right, but from a science-based approach, it might be fine. Like, so leather and regenerative agriculture is an example. We haven't got time to go into that, but there's so I think inform yourself, stay hopeful, be a discerning consumer, buy less, buy better, make sure there's a story behind it that makes it worth your while to wear it. And be defined, and I am doing the clothing. I mean, the clothes, it shouldn't be what the clothes say about you, it's what you say about your clothes. That should be the really fun bit. So I think that there's a lot we can do in the, I think supporting some smaller startups too, that are really starting from the ground up to be sustainable, trying to be sustainable with really strong science-based values is really, really good. And then as business, be bold. We're at a fork in the road. It's not even a crossroads. We have 2 ways of going. We can decide to race to the bottom and basically we'll be the extinction and we'll destroy our world and just keep doing things the way we've been doing over a very recent time in our history. Or we can decide we want to thrive. And if we want to thrive, we have to be bold and go for it as businesses and really say, this is what's going to work. We've got 10 years to put ourselves on a new trajectory. We know what we've got to do. We've got to protect, we've got to stop polluting, and we've got to restore. And just let's do it in our business, together with other businesses and outside our business.
Let's do it. Kristin, your last word.
Well, how could I add to that except to say that on the Helen covered the consumer and business front perfectly. On the citizen front, vote for people who believe in environmental change and environmental production. And I have to say, in this very divided world of politics, not just the US, but a lot of places, the environment should not be political. We all breathe. We all drink water. We all need food. It has been politicized and it shouldn't be. We all need to work together and unify around our life support system. We're on this small blue planet together and it's our only spaceship Earth and we must take care of it.
That is brilliant. I definitely vote for that.
Yes.
Well, I just want to thank you one more time for the thoughts, the enthusiasm, the energy, the really good energy. And actually, I know that you guys will provide some links and so on to actually share with everybody that have been tuning in today. So thank you again for your time, and I'll pass it on to Claudia to sign us off. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Great to see you both and be here. Great privilege. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristin and Helen. Thank you all for joining us today. Please register for our next webinar on Thursday, the 19th of November We'll be reflecting on the things that 2020 has taught us about business survival. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter to receive your invite. Stay safe. We'll see you soon. Thank you.